Hello, my name is Tim Creamer. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State School Boards Association. Welcome to NYSSBA Newsmakers. This is an opportunity when I have to sit down with people who are leaders in the education field here in New York. And today my guest is the president of the New York State United Teachers, Karen McGee. Welcome, Karen.
Pleasure to be here, Tim.
We're really
Thank
glad
you.
to have you. So let's start off by learning a little bit about the organization that you head up. What is the mission of the New York State United Teachers?
Well, the New York State United Teachers represents over 600,000 members, members who are educators in the field of education, healthcare, human services, and we have a couple of odd members that are lifeguards and toll collectors and things such as that. But obviously our primary goal being in the field of education and healthcare is to ensure that our members are protected so that they can do their jobs. And by protected, I mean safe working environments.
Right.
And they're able to go to work and do the work and deliver the services that they need to deliver on a daily basis.
Well, you guys are certainly a known commodity here in Albany, and I think really statewide. How many people work for NYSUT, by the way?
We have over 400 employees at the moment.
Wow, really?
Statewide.
Now, there have not been that many presidents.
I am the third.
Third, yeah, so there haven't been that many. So what are those characteristics about you? What's your background that kind of led you to that presidency?
Well, I am an educator. I served in the classroom for close to 30 years. So I started out in the field of recreation, doing therapeutic recreation services. So I've always had a love for children and ensuring that they're successful and that they have opportunities. And that's where the therapeutic background comes in. My certifications are general education and special education, but my background is in behavioral science.
Okay.
So I always like to see the integration of society and what's going on psychologically in people and how they make those decisions. And I think that is what has actually helped me to develop and hone some leadership skills, because you have to understand that somehow the obvious problem is not usually what is the driver in most people's situations, and how do you tease out the two and figure out what the real issues are. So I think I have a unique skill set to actually address issues that come up with both my members, the locals, and on the bigger, broader, obviously legislative side and legal side.
Well, I think that must be working, because I hear regularly admiration for the work that you're doing and a sense of accomplishment. Tell me, what are some of the things that have happened in your presidency that you're most proud of?
The one thing that I think I am proudest of is that we have changed how the conversation takes place. Conversations about public education have been put back with the Board of Regents. And I'm proud of that. And I think that came out of some honest, open, frank conversations with the governor. The establishment of the task force that really allows the practitioners to be part of the process speaks volumes right now.
Yeah.
The change of the Board of Regents and the active debate and conversations that have ensued are really making the dialogue about public education happen, and happen in the right hands. So the inclusion and the folding in of educators in that process, I think, is the thing I'm most proud of. I wouldn't go to the doctor and then take the opinion of the driver that dropped me off if I were to take a bus or cab. I would want the expert's opinion in formulating process going forward, and we're starting to see that happen, and I'm very proud of that. I think my members feel empowered and feel that they are being truly represented and their needs are being heard, which is an important piece for us as an organization.
Right.
And they're seeing the results that maybe they didn't feel that they were seeing. Of course, there's so much work to do.
Kind of a pride.
There's a lot more pride at this point in time. You know, we still need, with the teacher shortage that currently exists, and we're looking at maybe 48% drop of teachers enrolling in education programs in the last 4 years. We're at a point where we have to look at what are those factors that are causing that. And I think a big piece of it is respect and lack of respect for the profession. And that goes from just the conversations that are happening, as well as the access to education, the testing certification programs that have been put in place. But it's just a general attitude that has existed that there was no hope for public education.
I'm going to talk to you a little more about teacher recruitment, teacher shortages. In fact, I have a board meeting coming up soon, and we're, as a board, going to use this as a launching time to talk about the issue of teacher shortages ourselves, to become informed about what are the realities of these circumstances in New York. You know, speaking of education reforms, both of us have worked in this field for a long time, and we've seen things come and go, and we've seen a lot of discussions about education reforms that some people would have us throw out everything, start from scratch, new standards, new curriculum, new methodologies, the whole 9 yards. We've seen the role of the teacher be talked about as it needs to be more of a coach facilitator rather than the sage on the stage sort of approach. We've seen a lot of talk about project-oriented sort of education, team teaching, a student team approach where you have students always working together as groups on project-based. I've seen a lot of focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math courses as if that's the only thing that really matters if you're college and career ready. I think all of these things probably have some merit, one piece or another, but these wholesale changes, one-size-fits-all approach, I think we would agree that's not going to work. But I am interested in your ideas about what do you think needs to change, if anything, in public education today, and in particular, what do you see as the role of the teacher going forward?
Well, the first thing I would consider is there's been so much talk about tests. We have to move the conversation to assessments.
Okay.
Assessments are broader based. They take on a variety of different forms. When we look at project-based learning, when we look at performance schools and portfolio assessments, that's the way that gives us plenty of options for our students. You know, I've always viewed in my teaching career the value of what I would call the video, the long-term look at a child versus a snapshot, which is a one-day, you know, Polaroid.
Yep. Sure.
For those of us who are old enough to know what Polaroid is, Polaroids are. But that snapshot doesn't necessarily give us a picture of what that child's capable of doing and how much they've learned in a year.
Right.
So I think we have to look at how we prepare our students. Are we preparing them to be competitive? And working in groups on group-type projects is an important component. Succeeding on their own is also an important component. So we have to look at a one-size-fits-all does not work.
No.
We saw it with the evaluation system, where there was a cookie-cutter approach designed that was to be circulated and utilized throughout the entire state. And the recognition was there has to be local autonomy.
You know, the thing that I've noted in all of this is there's this focus on instruments, like an APPR testing instrument or a test given to students, as if that's the most important thing. This is a people business.
Correct.
This is, you know, students and adults, and, you know, I'm fond of saying this all looks great on paper, but then you add real people to the equation and it gets a lot more complicated and nuanced, and it's not as simple as just saying, oh, we've got an APPR in place or we have this perfect test in place. There is no perfect test.
I think what has happened all along is the desire to measure progress and to evaluate teachers is trying to be pushed into a science. And education is an art.
That's true.
So when you try to quantify an art, we could look at the same picture and have very different reactions to it. You know, so you can't really quantify an art, but yet there's a desire to fit this, you know, square peg into a round hole theory.
Yeah.
And it's not working. That's where the priorities of the locals and the ability to be flexible and have autonomy is really important in the evaluation system.
Now, this is where you and I see together, because we advocate for local control all the time, and, you know, having those decisions made as close to the classroom level at the local level is very important. Hey, let me ask you really quickly about a few issues that are kind of current as we speak here today. I keep hearing this term restorative justice. Keeps coming up time and time again, and there's all this legislation and regulation and all these people telling us from afar how we should maintain discipline in our classrooms, and they have this concept of restorative justice. I'm not sure I entirely understand what it is. Maybe you could help me. And I would be interested in your take on restorative justice. To what extent does it make sense to have Albany trying to control disciplinary issues, or should those be those local control issues? And what is NYSUT's position on restorative justice?
Well, that's a lot of questions rolled into
Right,
one.
right. But tell me about your position on that.
We support a restorative justice program,
Okay.
but we have to look at what's been done so far. So restorative justice is a program. So we see where it was implemented in Syracuse. The intent was honorable, but without the proper resources and professional development, quality professional development consistently done for all the folks who work in the school, not just the teachers, the bus drivers, the custodians. It has to be an entire family or group issue.
Yep.
And the training and the philosophy behind it has to be engaged by the entire community of learners and all of who touch our students in the schools.
Well, as I understand it, there were suggestions being made that kids of color in particular were being disciplined at a higher rate than white kids, for
Yes,
example,
no,
and therefore we need to have a different methodology as to how we treat those kids, and that's how this restorative justice came about.
Absolutely.
But I've also heard from teachers that say, well, quite honestly, there's some kids that we can't keep in the classroom. They're a danger to either ourselves, the teachers, to the other students. They're highly disruptive. Is that part of all this
Well, there's
discussion?
a couple of moving pieces here, right?
Yeah.
Disproportionately, Black, Latino, and special needs students are being suspended.
Okay.
And that's where, or the impetus for a restorative justice program comes into play.
Yes.
Because a student can't learn if they're not in the classroom. So you have to find that balance between a high-quality training program that allows educators and the school community to ensure that students can stay in school whenever possible.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to look at it that it's not a one-shot approach.
Right.
Because you have to look at all of the other factors that come into play. Our school social workers, our guidance counselors have been removed from the process, been removed from our schools based on budget cuts.
Right.
And where they're not required. These are the supports that ensure our student services are met.
Does the program require that the parents become involved?
Well, it requires the training component for the entire school community. The school becomes more of the support. I'm not certain to the
Yeah.
degree on the program of which the parent has to be involved, so I don't want to misspeak.
Yeah.
But the goal is to keep our students in school. Now, that's a delicate balance because you don't want to empower the students to be able to just run roughshod in the classroom
That's
either.
right.
So you have to have that delicate balance.
Yeah.
But you want to have some type of a sequenced program that encourages keeping students in school and doesn't and addresses the issue of the disproportionate number of minority students and special needs students who are just being tossed aside.
It's complicated.
And it's extremely complicated.
Yeah.
You know, the Nolan bill, you know, while there's merit to Assemblywoman Nolan's bill, there's no money for the funding piece of
Right,
it.
right.
So we're back to the same piece you asked about, should it be, you know, something that the legislature takes care of? Well, if it's legislative and it happens through the legislature, the odds are it will be implemented. The
Right.
problem here is that the Nolan bill has to include the money to do it. Otherwise, we're back to the situation in Syracuse,
Right.
where they basically trained 5 people in the restorative justice model and thought that by osmosis, I guess, everyone else would now all of a sudden know what to do.
Right.
And that's where they neglected to realize, and we're not opposed to turnkey trainers, but the training has to be consistent and include
Absolutely.
everyone to make it work.
Right.
You're changing a whole philosophy that's been in place for how many years?
And this is not just flipping a switch.
It's not
This-
flipping a switch.
Yeah.
no.
We talked a few minutes ago about recruitment, teacher shortages, things like that. So this report came out recently called Teach New York, and it was ushered to us through SUNY and the State Education Department, done in cooperation. There were representatives from your organization and from my organization on the advisory board. And when the recommendations came forward, your organization and your sister organization, the University United Professions, decided, take our name off. We're not embracing this report, we're rejecting it. Why did you reject it?
Well, we rejected the report, and NYSUT had a representative on the committee, and Dr. Cole, the president of UUP, was part of the process, but we did not agree with what was written into the report. It was not reflective of what was discussed and the concerns that were raised, we made many attempts to rectify that situation prior to asking for our names to be removed.
Yeah.
The fact that there were no deans on the committee, there was not a real representation of the faculty on the committee. You're again developing a report without including and folding in the experts in the field.
Okay.
And I find it interesting, now that a 140-page document has been generated, now is the time to start the listening tour.
Yeah.
It kind of, I paralleled it to the rollout of the Common Core. We put the cart in front of the horse, and then we wonder why it didn't work.
Do you guys have, does NYSUT have kind of an answer for the idea, the concerns about teacher shortages and recruiting and training teachers?
Well, we've brought this concern many times to the chancellor because obviously, over 48, 49% decline in teachers enrolling, students enrolling into teacher training programs has been a tremendous concern of ours. I think the issue of respect or lack thereof for the profession right now, the certification process in New York State has made many teachers decide to go elsewhere to teach. Because the process is cumbersome, it's costly for our students who want to become teachers to navigate the process, and the money expended for EdTPA and the other certification exams we're finding is really making it difficult for us to have diversity in our teaching force.
So do you have kind of a minority report and set of recommendations that you would say we would prefer this over the Teach New York recommendation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll look forward to...
Starting with the certification process.
Okay. All right. I'll look forward to reading about that.
And our pushback on EdTPA in the last 2 years is crystal clear. It was one of the first things I did as president when John King was in office in New York.
I got one last question, and this has to do with where kind of our places meet. I represent the school boards, you represent the teachers, and what newspapers have noted is during this last round of school board elections, and I think this has been the case for many years, but it's been most noted recently, that a number of vacancies, and it may have been challenges to incumbents for school board seats, were by candidates who had been recruited and were supported by the New York State United Teachers, or perhaps organizations that support opting out. And I'm wondering, do you guys have a role in seeking out candidates and supporting them for school board seats?
Well, absolutely. This is nothing new that NYSUT's
No.
involved in school board races. Look, earlier in this conversation, I spoke to the fact that it's important that educators have a role in making education policy. With over 600,000 members, obviously our teachers are the community.
Right.
So who better to elect to local school boards than educators? They have a wealth of experience, they understand the issues,
Right.
and so we have been, for the future of public education, we are out there ensuring that we're getting educators and pro-public education candidates elected to the school board.
We recently did a survey and came to find out that about 50% of the people who are on school boards are either educators, former educators, see themselves as that, or are related to somebody who's in the education field. And so it really is. A lot of your members are my members and vice versa. I understand that. And my experience working all these years for school boards has been some of our best school board members have that professional educator background. And I'm glad to see that this is occurring. So I think we can work together on this, certainly, for sure. It has been a pleasure to be with you here
Same
today.
here.
Thank you. This has been
Absolutely.
great. I really enjoyed it very much. I learned a lot. And so this is Tim Creamer. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State School Boards Association. My guest today has been the President of New York State United Teachers, Karen McGee. Thank you so much, Karen, for being with us today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Tim.
All right, thank
Good
you.
to see you.
Brought to you by Sprint.